The coffee was almost ready. Barbara May Thompson could tell by the smell, that deep, slightly burnt edge that meant the pot had been sitting just long enough. She shuffled across the kitchen in her worn terry cloth slippers, the ones with the embroidered roses that her friend Dorothy had given her 2 Christmases ago. Outside the window above the sink, the dogwood tree was beginning to bud, pale pink tips pushing through bare gray branches. It happened every year like clockwork, sometime in late February, and every year Barbara stood at that window and felt something settle in her chest like a warm hand. Robert would have loved this morning, she thought. He always did. She reached for her mug, the big one with the chipped handle that said World's Okayest Grandma, a gag gift from Tyler, and poured her coffee. 2 spoonfuls of Folgers. No sugar. Let it sit 4 minutes before you pour, or it's not worth drinking. Robert had taught her that in 1971, their first apartment, a place so small you could stand in the middle and touch both walls if you stretched your arms out. He'd been very serious about it, the way young men are serious about small things when they're trying to feel established. 4 minutes, not 3, not 5. 4. She smiled at the memory and checked her phone out of habit. 1 new voicemail. Lauren. Barbara set the coffee down and pressed play. Did you talk to the doctor yet? She keeps forgetting things. If we can get Dr. Nguyen to put something on paper, anything, we move forward with the power of attorney next week. Derek already signed off. Once we have the house, we list it by April. She'll never even know what happened until it's done. The message was 41 seconds long. Barbara listened to it once. Then she set the phone face down on the counter and stood very still for a long time, looking at the dogwood tree. The coffee went cold. To understand what happened to Barbara Thompson, you have to understand who Barbara Thompson was. Not who she became after. Not the woman who would eventually sit in a Bloomington courtroom with a thermos of coffee and a spiral notebook and watch justice get served 1 exhibit at a time. You have to understand the woman she was before all of it. The woman made up of 50 years of small, deliberate sacrifices that nobody ever saw. She was born Barbara May Collings in 1950 in Evansville, Indiana, the second of 5 kids, raised in a 2-bedroom house on the east side of town where the streets were named after trees, but the trees themselves had long since been cut down. Her father, Gerald, drove a coal truck 6 days a week. Her mother, June, cleaned rooms at the Holiday Inn on Route 41 until her knees gave out in 1978. Neither of them ever talked about money the way people talk about money in self-help books, as something to be cultivated or grown or manifested. In the Collings household, money was a practical problem. You had it or you didn't, and either way you showed up for work on Monday. Barbara showed up. That was the thing about her. She always showed up. At 16, she was waitressing at a diner called Millie's Kitchen on the corner of 4th and Oak, splitting tips with a girl named Rhonda Perkins who went on to marry a dentist and move to Scottsdale. At 19, she met Robert Allen Thompson at a 4th of July cookout hosted by a mutual friend, and she knew within approximately 45 minutes that she was going to marry him. Not because he was flashy. Robert Thompson was the least flashy man in any room he ever walked into, but because he asked her questions and then actually listened to the answers. In 1950s and 60s, Indiana, Barbara had found that to be a genuinely rare quality in a man. They married in June of 1971. Small ceremony. Her mother cried. His mother brought a casserole that nobody touched. Robert got on at Hendrix Sheet Metal that fall, running a punch press. Good union job. Steady hours. Barbara kept waitressing. Same diner, same corner section, same regulars who called her Hun, and left quarters on the table every Tuesday for 11 years. They weren't rich. They weren't even close. But they were careful. God, were they careful. Barbara kept a ledger, an actual handwritten ledger, blue cover, bought at the Walgreens on Main Street, and every week she wrote down exactly what came in and exactly what went out, down to the penny. Robert used to joke that she knew their bank balance better than the bank did. Which is true, she would say, because I've actually read the statements. By 1987, they had saved enough for a down payment on a house at 412 Maple Creek Drive. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen with yellow tile that was already outdated by 1987, but that Barbara loved anyway because it let in the morning light, and a backyard with a dogwood tree that bloomed pink every April without fail, like the yard's own personal promise. Barbara stood in that backyard the day they got the keys and thought, this is it. This is what all of it was for. Lauren was born in 1978, And from the moment that girl took her first breath, small and furious and already somehow opinionated, Barbara Thompson reorganized her entire existence around one purpose: making sure Lauren had more than she did. More stability, more opportunity, more options. Barbara took on a second job cleaning office buildings on weeknights starting when Lauren was 3. Robert picked up overtime whenever the shop offered it, which was most weekends. Lauren got piano lessons at $12 a week from a retired music teacher named Mrs. Farber, who smelled like lavender and expected you to practice. Lauren got braces at 14. Lauren got new shoes for the first day of school every single year without exception. Even in 1993, when the factory cut hours to 3 days a week, and Barbara and Robert ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights a week for 4 months straight, so that Lauren wouldn't know. Lauren never knew. That was intentional, Barbara would say later. I didn't want her to feel like a burden. I wanted her to feel like a gift. Big difference. Lauren graduated from Indiana University in May of 2000. Business administration. First person in the Collings family to get a 4-year degree. At the commencement ceremony, Barbara sat in the bleachers of Assembly Hall in a pale blue dress she'd bought on clearance at JCPenney and cried so hard that the woman next to her offered a packet of Kleenex and a sympathetic squeeze of the arm. Robert sat beside her with his hands on his knees, not crying, because Robert Thompson did not cry in public. But his jaw was working in that way it did when he was holding something in. Afterward, at the restaurant, nothing fancy, just an Applebee's, but they had a cake with Lauren's name on it. Robert reached across the table and took Barbara's hand and said quietly, "We did good, Barb." She kept that diploma on the living room wall for 24 years, right next to Lauren's first grade school photo, where Lauren was missing her 2 front teeth and grinning like she'd just gotten away with something. Robert died in March of 2009, a stroke, a Tuesday morning. He'd gone out to get the newspaper. They still got the physical paper, had for 30 years. And he was just gone, right there in the front yard, by the time Barbara realized he hadn't come back in. She was 59 years old. Suddenly, bewilderingly alone. She didn't fall apart. That wasn't who she was, and more to the point, that wasn't what Robert would have wanted. She kept the house. She tended the garden. She joined the Thursday book club at the Bloomington Public Library, a group of mostly retired women who spent approximately 20 minutes discussing whatever book they'd read, and roughly 2 hours discussing everything else. It was through that book club, in the spring of 2010, that Barbara met Dorothy Simmons. Dot lived 4 houses down on Maple Creek Drive, 67 years old at the time, widowed 5 years prior, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that carried down the block and a bluntness that people who didn't know her sometimes found jarring, and people who did know her found absolutely essential. "You look like you haven't slept properly in 6 months, Dot said to Barbara at their very first book club meeting, over a plate of lemon bars. 5.5, Barbara replied. Dot nodded like that was a perfectly sensible answer. "I know a good doctor. You want her number?" They had been best friends ever since. Lauren married Derek James Hargrove in September of 2005 at a vineyard outside of Bloomington on a Saturday that stayed warm and clear all the way through the reception. He was 29. She was 27. He was a project manager at a real estate development company called Meridian Properties, which in practice meant he was very good at talking to people in rooms and making things sound more straightforward than they were. He was charming. She'd give him that much. The kind of charming that you notice immediately and then spend a little while deciding whether to trust. He called her Mom from the second Thanksgiving. He remembered her birthday without prompting. He laughed at Robert's old jokes. And Robert's old jokes, let's be honest, were not that funny, with what seemed like genuine appreciation. Tyler was born in 2004, the year before they married. A happy accident that Lauren had announced over the phone with a mixture of nerves and barely contained excitement. By the time of the wedding, he was already a toddler with his grandfather's quiet eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Barbara had adored him from his first breath. But there was a thing that happened sometimes, at family dinners, when the conversation turned to the house. Something small, something you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. Derek's eyes would shift, just briefly, just for a second, to the room they were sitting in. Not the way a person looks at a room they're comfortable in, the way a person looks at a room they're calculating. Barbara noticed. She filed it away. She told herself she was being uncharitable. Lauren was happy. That was what mattered. That, she would later say, was the first mistake. Not the last, but the first. After Robert died, Lauren and Derek started visiting less. It was gradual enough that Barbara didn't register it as a pattern until it was already established. First, it was every other weekend, then once a month, then holidays and birthdays only. Barbara didn't push. She understood. They had lives, careers, a kid to raise. Tyler was 16 by 2020, already taller than Derek, already quieter than either of his parents. Lauren had been promoted twice at her job at a regional insurance company. Derek traveled for work. Life got busy. Barbara knew how life got busy. She'd been busy for 30 years. But in the spring of 2021, something changed. Lauren started calling more, texting more. She was suddenly, after years of being intermittently present, deeply interested in Barbara's day-to-day. "How are you feeling, Mom? Are you eating okay? Have you been getting out of the house?" Barbara appreciated it at first. She'd missed her daughter. It was nice to feel thought about. Then the questions shifted. "Mom, have you updated your will recently? Derek says it's really important to keep that stuff current." "Mom, are you still using that old bank? Have you thought about consolidating your accounts somewhere it's easier to manage?" "Mom, I was talking to a friend whose parents went through something really tough when one of them got sick. Like no one had legal authority to make decisions? It was a nightmare. Have you ever thought about a power of attorney? Just so we know we can take care of things if something happens." Just so we know we can take care of things. The phrase kept showing up, in slightly different forms, in slightly different conversations, like a song stuck on repeat. Barbara noticed. She didn't say anything about noticing, but she noticed. She was 71 years old. She drove herself to the grocery store. She balanced her own checkbook. She could tell you, without looking, the interest rate on her savings account and the exact date her homeowner's insurance renewed every year. She did not need managing. She said as much to Lauren kindly once. Lauren said, "Mom, I know you're sharp. I'm not saying you're not. I just worry about you, that's all. Is it wrong to worry about your own mother?" And what do you say to that? What do you say that doesn't make you sound paranoid or ungrateful or like you're pushing away the only family you have left? "Nothing," Barbara said later. "That's exactly what they count on. That there's nothing you can say. It started small. So small that if you hadn't been raised by a woman who drove a coal truck and a woman who cleaned hotel rooms, if you hadn't grown up learning to pay attention to small things because small things were usually the only warning you'd get, you might have missed it entirely." Lauren began referencing conversations that Barbara had no memory of having. "Mom, we talked about this last week. You said it was fine." "I did?" "Yeah, you don't remember? You said it was totally fine." Barbara would sit with the phone in her hand after hanging up and genuinely question herself. Did I say that? Did I forget? Am I starting to... Is this what starting to lose it feels like? She'd always thought her mind was solid. But doubt, when someone plants it carefully enough, has a way of taking root in even solid ground. Then came the doctor's appointments. Lauren started asking to come along, starting in early 2022. "Just to be an extra set of ears, Mom. You know how it is. You're in there, the doctor's talking fast. It's hard to keep track of everything." Barbara had agreed because it seemed reasonable, because Lauren seemed to genuinely want to help, because Barbara was a person who assumed the best about the people she loved until she had extremely compelling evidence not to. The compelling evidence arrived pretty quickly. At the first appointment Lauren attended, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, Barbara's primary care physician for 11 years, a thoughtful woman who had always treated Barbara like the intelligent adult she was, asked Barbara how she'd been sleeping. Before Barbara could answer, Lauren said, "She's been kind of restless, right, Mom? Forgetting things. I've noticed she repeats herself sometimes." Barbara looked at her daughter. "I don't think I repeat myself that much." "Mom, Lauren's voice has that particular quality, gentle but firm, the voice of someone humoring a person who doesn't quite get it. You told me the same story about Mrs. Perkins 3 times last month. Rhonda Perkins is an interesting woman. People tell interesting stories more than once." Dr. Nguyen made a small, careful note and changed the subject. But Barbara had watched the doctor's face and seen something there. Not agreement exactly, but the kind of professional neutrality that means I'm logging this. And she hadn't liked it one bit. At home, things started disappearing. Not big things, not obvious things, small things, the kind you'd doubt yourself about even if you knew. A legal pad where Barbara kept notes about her accounts, Gone one afternoon, reappeared 3 days later on the wrong shelf. A folder she'd kept in the third drawer of the kitchen for 15 years. Mortgage papers, insurance documents, Robert's death certificate, their social security cards. Missing for nearly 3 weeks before Lauren casually mentioned she'd organized some of your papers, Mom. They were kind of everywhere. They were not kind of everywhere. Barbara knew exactly where they were. She'd known where they were for 15 years. But she didn't say that. Because Lauren would have given her that look. The patient, concerned, poor mom look. And Barbara would have felt crazy, and she was so damn tired of feeling crazy. By the fall of 2022, Barbara had started to question herself in ways she never had before. Not completely. There was a part of her, some deep-down bedrock part made out of calling stubbornness and decades of watching her own pennies, that kept saying, "This isn't you. Something is wrong here, and it is not you." But the surface was getting soft. The doubt was spreading, and that, she would later understand, had been the entire point. They were softening her up, Michael Patterson would explain to her, months later, sitting across from her in his Indianapolis office. Classic financial elder abuse playbook. Step 1, establish cognitive decline narrative. Step 2, isolate the target from outside support. Step 3, manufacture dependency. Step 4, move in for legal control before the target understands what's happening. It has a playbook? Barbara had said. They all use the same one, Michael said, because it works. They came on a Sunday in January of 2023, Lauren and Derek, together. Lauren in a cream-colored blouse that Barbara recognized as the one she'd worn to Tyler's high school graduation the previous spring. Derek in what Barbara privately called his closing a deal posture. Shoulders back, hands relaxed, the practiced ease of a man who makes his living convincing people of things. They brought coffee from the good place downtown. They were warm. They were attentive. They asked about the book club, about how Dot was doing, about whether the furnace was running okay this winter. Then Derek set a manila folder on the kitchen table. "So, Mom," he said, "we've been doing some research, Lauren and I both, and we really think it's time we talked about getting some proper legal protections in place. For your benefit. For all of us, really." The folder contained a durable power of attorney document. 11 pages, small print, Barbara's name on the signature line at the bottom of page 9. "This just gives us the ability to step in if something happens," Lauren said. Her voice was warm. Her hands were folded on the table. "Medical decisions, financial stuff. If you're ever in a situation where you can't advocate for yourself, we need to be able to do that for you. It's what any responsible family would do. We should have done this years ago, honestly." Barbara looked at the document. Then she looked at Lauren, then Derek, then back at the document. "I'd like to have a lawyer look at this before I sign anything," she said. The silence that followed was approximately 2 seconds long. To Barbara, it felt considerably longer. Lauren's smile didn't disappear exactly. It flickered, like a candle in a draft. And then it was back, steady and warm. But Barbara had seen the flicker, and she filed it away next to the thing about Derek's eyes at dinner parties. "Mom," Lauren's voice was softer now, hurt almost. "You don't trust us?" There it is, Barbara thought. There's the trap. Because there's no good answer to that question. You say yes, of course I trust you, and you sign the document. You say no, not entirely, and you're the paranoid, ungrateful, difficult elderly mother who's pushing her daughter away. The question isn't a question. It's a door that only opens one direction. "It's not about trust," Barbara said carefully. "It's about being smart. That's what you always told me, isn't it, Lauren? Be smart about paperwork." Lauren had, in fact, said almost exactly that at some point. She couldn't argue with it now without looking unreasonable. So she smiled again, tighter this time, and said they'd leave the papers with Barbara. She could look them over. No rush. They left before noon. The good coffee sat half-finished on the counter. Barbara waited until she heard Derek's car back out of the driveway. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, looked at that stack of papers, and thought very carefully for about 15 minutes. Then she picked up the phone and called Dorothy Simmons. "You busy?" she said when Dot picked up. "I'm watching a Dateline rerun that I've already seen 4 times, Dot said. "Why?" "Something happened. I need to talk it through with somebody." "I'll bring a pound cake," Dot said. "Give me 20 minutes. She made it in 14. Barbara May Thompson had spent 50 years building something. A home. A life. A sense of self so solid that even the most sustained campaign to erode it couldn't quite finish the job. Dot Simmons arrived with a pound cake and a lot of questions, and that was where everything changed. Dorothy Simmons had a gift that Barbara had always admired and occasionally found mildly terrifying. She could listen to a story all the way through without interrupting, and then, in the silence that followed, ask the one question that cut straight to the bone. She sat at Barbara's kitchen table and ate 2 slices of pound cake while Barbara talked. She didn't say uh-huh, or oh my, or any of the things people say when they're half listening. She just listened. Her hands were wrapped around her mug. Her eyes didn't move from Barbara's face. When Barbara finished, Dot set down her fork. "How long has this been going on?" she said. "The visits to the doctor? About a year. The questions about my finances. Longer. 2 years, maybe. And the folder, the one with Robert's death certificate. 3 weeks before it turned up." Dot nodded slowly. "Barbara, honey, I need you to hear me say something, and I need you to not get defensive, because you know I love you, and I am saying this because I love you." "That's a lot of preamble, Dot." "What you are describing," Dot said, "has a name. It's called financial elder abuse, and in the state of Indiana, it is a Class C felony." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car went past on Maple Creek Drive. "That's a strong word," Barbara said. "Lauren is my daughter." "I know she is." "She's not. I mean, she's pushy. She's always been pushy, but she's not—" "Barbara." Dot's voice was gentle, but it had that quality underneath, like rebar inside concrete. "I'm not saying she doesn't love you. People who love each other do terrible things to each other every single day. That's practically the plot of every book we've read in that club for the last 10 years. She paused. "Has Lauren ever asked you to let her handle any of your accounts directly? Transfer anything? Add her name to anything?" Barbara thought about it. "She asked about the savings account once, said it would be easier if she was a joint holder in case of emergency." "Did you do it?" "No." "Good." Dot stood up and refilled both their mugs without being asked. "Here's what's going to happen. I know a lawyer in Indianapolis, good man, been doing elder law for years, comes highly recommended by people I trust. His name is Michael Patterson. I'm going to call him tomorrow morning." "Dot, I don't want to make a big deal out of—" "Barbara," Dot said, sitting back down. "They showed up on a Sunday with 11 pages of legal documents and made you feel like asking for a lawyer was some kind of betrayal. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing." Barbara looked at her pound cake for a moment. Then she looked up. "Okay," she said. "Call him." Michael Ray Patterson had been practicing elder law for 22 years out of a 2-story brick building on Meridian Street in Indianapolis, where the waiting room had good lighting and magazines that were actually current, because he had strong opinions about what a waiting room communicates to a person who is already nervous. He was 52 years old, broad-shouldered, with reading glasses he was always misplacing, and a habit of listening with his whole body, leaning slightly forward, elbows on the desk, pen in hand but not writing, just present. He had seen a lot. He had seen children do things to their parents that would make you reassess your entire understanding of family as a concept. He was not easily shocked. He met Barbara on a Tuesday afternoon in late January of 2023. Dot drove because she had insisted, and because Barbara had let her insist. Within 15 minutes of hearing the story, Patterson set his pen down and said 3 things. Number 1, do not sign anything. Nothing. Not a birthday card if it has a signature line on it. You call me first. Barbara nodded. Number 2, start documenting everything. Dates, times, what was said, who was present. Write it down the same day it happens while it's fresh. Details matter. I already do that, Barbara said. I've kept a daily log since January 2nd. Patterson looked at her over his reading glasses. Good. That's very good. He picked up his pen again. Number 3. He paused. Mrs. Thompson, I strongly suggest you check your bank accounts. All of them. Go back at least 2 years. Do it today, if possible, before you go home. Something in his tone, not alarmed exactly, but very deliberate, made Barbara's stomach tighten. Why? She said. What do you think you'll find? I don't know, Patterson said. But in my experience, by the time a family reaches the power of attorney conversation, they've usually already started somewhere else. She checked the account that evening, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of tea that went cold before she touched it. It was a savings account she'd opened in 2009, the week after Robert's funeral, with the proceeds from his life insurance policy, $43,000. She hadn't touched it since the day she deposited it. She thought of it as sacred. Not quite a memorial, but close. Robert's last provision. The thing he'd left behind to make sure she was okay. She typed in her password. She waited for the page to load. The balance read, $11,240. Barbara sat with that number for a very long time. She clicked on the transaction history and scrolled back. 14 withdrawals over 22 months, all of them between $1,500 and $2,800. All of them processed through an online authorization. All of them time-stamped between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., hours when Barbara had been asleep. $31,760. Gone. She counted the transactions twice, then a third time, because some part of her brain kept insisting she must be misreading something. She wasn't misreading anything. She sat in her kitchen, in her terry cloth slippers, and looked at the number on the screen, and felt something move through her that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was the feeling of understanding something you'd been half knowing for a long time. The feeling of the last piece dropping into place and making the picture clear and wishing. God, wishing. The picture had turned out to be something else. Robert's money, taken 14 times, in the dark, while she slept 30 feet away. She called Michael Patterson at 7:42 p.m. He answered on the second ring. "Check your account," she said. "You were right." Patterson moved fast. Within 48 hours, he had contacted a title company and requested a full title search on 412 Maple Creek Drive. He said he'd call when he had something. He called on a Thursday morning. His voice had that careful, measured quality of someone delivering information they wish they didn't have. "Barbara, I need you to sit down." "I'm already sitting." "Okay." A pause. "In March of 2022, nearly a year before they brought you those documents on the Sunday, a home equity line of credit was opened against your property. $85,000. Midwest Regional Bank approved it based on a package of documents that included a durable power of attorney, granting Lauren Ann Hargrove full financial authority over you and your assets." The silence stretched. "I never signed a power of attorney," Barbara said. "I know. Not in March 2022. Not ever. I have never signed one." "I know," Patterson said again. "That's why I've already sent the signature to a forensic document examiner. A man named Gary Holloway, retired FBI, 30 years in the field. I should have his analysis by Monday." She needed to ask the question she already half knew the answer to. "And the $31,000 from Robert's savings, is that connected?" "They appear to be two separate violations," Patterson said carefully. The HELOC was a single calculated strike against the property itself. $85,000 borrowed against the house in one move. The savings account withdrawals were different, smaller, slower, spread across nearly 2 years. One was a siege. The other was a slow bleed. Both were deliberate. Barbara said nothing for a moment. "So she came at me from 2 directions at once," she said finally. "That's what the evidence suggests," Patterson said. "Yes, Gary Holloway came back in 72 hours. His report was 4 pages long, written in the precise, unambiguous language of a man who had testified in federal court dozens of times and knew how to say things that couldn't be argued with. The signature on the power of attorney was not Barbara May Thompson's signature. It was a careful imitation, close enough to pass a cursory bank review, not close enough to pass forensic analysis. The pen pressure was wrong. The letter form of the capital B was wrong. The way the T crossed in Thompson was wrong. Someone had forged Barbara Thompson's signature to access $85,000 against the home she and Robert had paid off completely in 1999. Patterson called to give her the news. When he finished reading the summary of Holloway's findings, Barbara said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "What happens now?" "Now," Patterson said, "we start building a case." That was on a Thursday. The important Tuesday came 3 weeks later. But first, on a morning in between, a silver Accord pulled into the driveway at 7:15 a.m. Barbara was at the kitchen window, same slippers, same coffee, same tree, when she heard the car. She looked out and felt her chest tighten. Derek. She watched him sit behind the wheel for a moment before getting out, and even from the kitchen window she could see that something was different about him. The closing a deal posture was gone entirely. His shoulders were up near his ears. He kept checking over his shoulder as he walked to the door. He rang the bell twice, quickly. Barbara opened the door and looked at him. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His eyes were red at the edges, like someone who hadn't been sleeping. He was alone. "Barbara," his voice was low, urgent. "I need 5 minutes. Please. Lauren doesn't know I'm here, and it needs to stay that way. I know that's asking a lot, but I need you to hear me out." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. "Coffee's fresh." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd laid that manila folder 3 weeks prior, and he talked fast, like a man who'd been rehearsing and was worried he'd lose his nerve. He'd found out about the forged POA 4 months after the fact, he said. Lauren had used his notary credentials to validate the documents. He was a licensed notary through his real estate work, without his knowledge. His stamp, his professional license. When he'd found out and confronted her, she'd looked at him with an expression he'd never seen on her face before and said, "If you say one word to anyone, I will tell them it was your idea. Your stamp, Derek. Your signature. Good luck explaining that." So he'd said nothing. For 4 months he'd said nothing, and the silence had been eating him alive. "I'm not a good guy in this story," he said. He was looking at his coffee mug, not at her. "I know that. I'm not asking you to think I am. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep looking at you and knowing what I know." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He set it on the table between them. "Everything's in there. The bank correspondence, Lauren's emails to Midwest Regional, the timeline." He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "There's a date on the last page. April 3rd. That's when she plans to list the house." 6 weeks away. Barbara looked at the envelope. She looked at Derek. She thought about Robert and the 4-minute coffee and the dogwood tree and $31,760 that had belonged to a quiet man who drove to get the newspaper one Tuesday morning and never came back. She reached out and took the envelope. "Thank you, Derek," she said. He nodded. He stood up. He didn't finish his coffee. At the door, he stopped without turning around. "For what it's worth," he said, "I always thought you were the sharpest person in any room you were ever in. Lauren used to say the same thing, back when—" He stopped. "Take care of yourself, Barbara." He walked to his car. He didn't look back. Barbara stood in the doorway and watched him go. Then she went inside, picked up her phone, and called Michael Patterson. "Derek Hargrove just left my house," she said. "You're going to want to hear this." Michael Patterson laid out the legal strategy across his desk like a man dealing cards. Deliberate, methodical, nothing face up until he was ready. They had the forensic analysis of the forged signature. They had Derek's envelope. They had the bank records showing 14 withdrawals at hours Barbara had been asleep. They had a title search showing an $85,000 lien on a house that had been mortgage-free for 25 years. What they didn't have yet was Lauren, in her own words, making clear she knew exactly what she was doing. "Indiana is a one-party consent state," Patterson said. "That means you can legally record any conversation you are personally a part of. Phone calls, in person, doesn't matter, without notifying the other party. That recording is admissible." Barbara looked at him steadily. "You want me to wear a wire? I want you to carry a digital recorder the size of your thumb in the breast pocket of your cardigan," Patterson said. "And I want you to let Lauren talk." "She will," Barbara said. "Lauren has always loved to talk." Dot, sitting beside her, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "That's putting it charitably." Patterson slid a small device across the desk. Matte black, lighter than an AA battery. "You press this button once to start, once to stop. That's it. Don't explain anything. Don't lead her anywhere. Just ask questions and let her fill the silence. People always fill the silence." "I know," Barbara said, picking it up. She turned it over in her palm. "I've been doing that my whole life." For 3 weeks, Barbara ran what she privately called her Tuesday operation, named for no particular reason except that Robert had always said Tuesdays were underrated days, good days for getting things done quietly. She wore the recorder every time Lauren called or visited. She kept her voice even. She asked careful, open-ended questions. "So what's your timeline on all this, honey?" And, "What did Derek say about the paperwork?" And then she did what she'd always been good at. She listened. Lauren talked. She talked about the house in the abstract, as if it were already a transaction rather than a home. She talked about the hassle of managing all this stuff from 2 hours away. She mentioned twice that the Indianapolis real estate market was really moving right now, that properties in this zip code are sitting on the market for like 10 days. Mom, 10 days. She said, in one recorded phone call that Patterson would later describe as prosecutorially beautiful, that she'd already had an informal conversation with a realtor friend about ballpark numbers. Barbara said, interesting, and I hadn't thought about that, and did not let her voice betray a single thing. People underestimate old women, she said later when someone asked how she'd managed it. That has always been our greatest advantage. It was a Tuesday morning in late February of 2023. Barbara was at the kitchen window, watching the dogwood tree. The blossoms were fully out now, that particular shade of pink that exists in the world for approximately 3 weeks a year and makes you feel obscurely grateful to be alive. She was thinking about Robert. She was thinking about how he would have handled all of this, and concluding, as she often did, that he would have handled it worse than she was, but with considerably more righteous fury. Her phone buzzed on the counter. One new voicemail. Lauren. She almost let it go to her call log to check later. She was in the middle of her 4-minute coffee sit, and she was a person who respected her own routines. But something made her reach for it. She pressed play. Did you talk to the doctor yet? She keeps forgetting things. If we can get Dr. Nguyen to put something on paper, anything, we move forward with the power of attorney next week. Derek already signed off. Once we have the house, we list it by April. She'll never even know what happened until it's done. 41 seconds. Barbara listened to it once. She set the phone face down on the counter. She stood at the window for a long moment and looked at the dogwood tree and breathed very carefully, the way she had learned to breathe in the weeks after Robert died. In through the nose, long and slow, out the same way. Don't rush it. Then she picked up the phone and listened again, and a fourth time. What had happened, Patterson would later establish, was this. Lauren had intended to send the message to a contact saved in her phone as Derek H., her husband. She had typed D in her message app and let autocomplete do the rest. But Lauren's contacts also included a cousin on Derek's side named Dana Hargrove, her realtor friend Diana, and, added 2 years ago with the label Dear Mom, Barbara's number. Dear Mom autocompleted before Derek H. Lauren had recorded herself laying out the entire plan. The doctor's note, the POA, the April listing date, and sent it, cleanly and completely, to the one person in the world it could destroy her with. Barbara set her coffee down. She picked up her phone. She called Michael Patterson. Michael, she said when he answered. Her voice was very calm. I think we're ready. 3 days before the confrontation, an envelope appeared in Barbara's mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet of notebook paper, college-ruled. The handwriting was a 19-year-old boy's handwriting. Large, slightly uneven, the letters of someone who grew up texting and only writes by hand when it matters. Dear Grandma Barbara, I don't know if you'll want to read this or not. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away. I found out about what Mom and Dad were planning about 1.5 years ago. I overheard them at the kitchen table one night when they thought I was asleep. Not all of it. Not the legal stuff, not the bank stuff. Just that they were going to try to get you declared incompetent so they could take over your finances and sell the house. I was 17. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself I must have misunderstood. But I knew I hadn't, and I've been sick about it every single day since. I already called Mr. Patterson. Dot gave me his number. I told him everything I heard. I told Detective Caldwell, too. I know that doesn't make up for staying quiet this long. I know it doesn't come close. I just need you to know that I love you. And I'm sorry. And the cornbread recipe you gave me for Christmas. I've been practicing. I think I'm almost getting it right. Tyler Barbara read the letter twice. She folded it back along its original crease and held it in both hands for a moment. Then she put it in the kitchen drawer, the third one down where she kept things that mattered, and went to call Dot. Barbara Thompson spent the next 2 weeks the way she had spent most of her life, doing what needed to be done without making a fuss about it. March 14th, a Saturday. Clear and cold, the kind of Indiana morning that can't decide if it's still winter. Detective Roy Caldwell arrived at 412 Maple Creek Drive at 8:55 a.m. in an unmarked car. He was followed by a caseworker from Adult Protective Services named Sandra Reeves, who carried a clipboard and wore the particular expression of someone who has seen this situation before and has strong feelings about it. Michael Patterson was already inside, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of Barbara's coffee, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Barbara had called Lauren on Thursday. She'd said she'd been thinking about the power of attorney, that she was ready to talk, that she'd make breakfast, Lauren's favorite, the French toast with the cinnamon and the real maple syrup, not the fake stuff. Lauren had said, "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do all that." Barbara had said, "I want to. Come at 9. At 9 o'clock, Lauren's car pulled into the driveway. She was wearing a cream blazer. She was carrying a fresh copy of the POA documents in a manila folder. She was smiling. Barbara met her at the door. Lauren hugged her, warm and tight, the way she used to when she was small, before everything got complicated and strategic. She smelled like the perfume Barbara had given her for Christmas in 2019. Barbara hugged her back. She held on for 1 second longer than necessary. Then she stepped back. "Lauren," she said, "there are some people here who'd like to speak with you." The living room. Lauren turned. She saw Caldwell. She saw Sandra Reeves with her clipboard. She saw Michael Patterson setting down his coffee mug and standing up with the particular unhurried calm of a man who has been waiting for this moment for 8 weeks. Lauren's expression shifted. Barbara had known that face for 45 years, and she watched it move through shock, then calculation, then something that sat somewhere between fear and, strangely, relief, as if some part of Lauren had been waiting for this moment as long as Barbara had. "Mom," Lauren's voice had lost its warmth. What was underneath was something flatter and more tired. "You don't understand the full picture." "Lauren," Barbara said, "I have the full picture. I've had it for 3 weeks. I gave you a chance to walk in here and tell me the truth." She paused. "You brought the paperwork instead." Detective Caldwell stepped forward. "Ms. Hargrove, I'm Detective Roy Caldwell with the Bloomington PD. I'd like to speak with you and your husband regarding several financial transactions and documents related to the property at 412 Maple Creek Drive. You are not under arrest at this time, but I strongly advise you to listen carefully." Lauren said nothing. She stood very still in the middle of her mother's living room, still holding the manila folder, and for just a moment, she looked exactly like the girl in the first-grade photo on the wall behind her, small and caught and not quite sure what happened next. Lauren Ann Hargrove was formally arrested 72 hours after she walked out of that living room. The charges were serious and specific. 3 counts: financial exploitation of an endangered adult, forgery, fraud. Bail was set at $75,000. One of the most significant developments in the case came from an unexpected source, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, Barbara's own physician. Dr. Nguyen had been quietly troubled for some time by the way Lauren had conducted herself during Barbara's appointments, the interrupting, the speaking over, the careful narrative of a mother who repeated herself and forgot things. After the arrest, she came forward voluntarily with a written statement. In it, she confirmed that at no point during any examination had she observed signs of cognitive impairment in Barbara Thompson that would justify a psychiatric evaluation or guardianship proceedings. Her statement was measured, clinical, and devastating. She wrote that Barbara had consistently demonstrated above-average cognitive function for her age, that she was oriented to time, place, and person, and that her memory for both immediate and long-term events was intact. The characterization of Barbara as mentally diminished, as represented to the practice by her daughter, was not consistent with any clinical observation Dr. Nguyen had made across 11 years of care. That statement was entered into evidence. The prosecution called Dr. Nguyen as a witness. She testified for 47 minutes. She never looked away from the jury. Michael Patterson successfully petitioned Midwest Regional Bank to void the fraudulent HELOC, presenting Gary Holloway's forensic analysis and the criminal charges now on file. After a 6-week negotiation, the bank agreed to remove the $85,000 lien from Barbara's property. 412 Maple Creek Drive was, once again, fully and completely hers. The $31,760 drained from Robert's savings account was a harder fight. The prosecution was working to recover those funds as part of restitution. Michael told Barbara not to hold her breath on the timeline. "That money was Robert's," she told him. "Every dollar of it. If I don't get it back in full, I'll donate whatever comes back to an elder abuse charity in his name. Either way, they don't get to keep it." The trial lasted 4 days. Barbara attended every single one. She sat in the third row with a thermos of coffee and her spiral notebook and the blue cardigan she'd worn the morning she played that voicemail back 4 times at the kitchen window. She took notes. She kept her face neutral and her posture straight. She was, as she had always been, a woman who showed up. The prosecution presented the forensic analysis, the bank records, the title search, 2 recorded phone calls in which Lauren could be heard directing Derek to keep Mom confused and to ensure Barbara doesn't talk to anyone outside the family about the house. Tyler's written statement was read aloud by the court clerk in a room that went very quiet. On day 3, Lauren took the stand. Her attorney built the case around love, a daughter's worry, an aging mother, the best of intentions. He used the word love 11 times. Barbara counted every one. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Claire Bowman, who wore the same navy blazer every single day of the trial, let him finish. Then she stood up, walked to the overhead projector, and placed the forged power of attorney on the screen. She asked Lauren to identify the signature at the bottom of the document. Lauren said it was hers. Claire Bowman looked at the jury. She looked back at Lauren. "Ms. Hargrove," she said, "that signature reads Barbara May Thompson, not Lauren Ann Hargrove." Lauren's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Bowman turned to face the jury box. "The signature on this document is a forgery," she said. Her voice was calm and even. "The bank records confirm unauthorized access going back 22 months. The forensic analysis is irrefutable. The defendant's own son testified to overhearing the plan. And the voice message, sent by the defendant to her own mother by mistake, tells you everything you need to know about intent." She paused. Mrs. Thompson did not need protecting. She needed protecting from her own daughter. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and 22 minutes. Guilty on all 3 counts. 36 months of probation. 200 hours of community service. Full restitution of $31,760, plus court costs. Barbara wrote the verdict in her spiral notebook in her careful, even handwriting. She underlined it once. Then she closed the notebook, capped her pen, and sat for a moment in the quiet of the courtroom. Dot, sitting beside her, reached over and took her hand. Neither of them said anything. Sometimes there isn't anything to say. Sometimes you just sit with what something cost you and let that be what it is. After a while, Barbara squeezed Dot's hand back. They got up. They put on their coats. They walked out together into an April afternoon that was cool and clear and smelled, faintly, like something beginning. Derek Hargrove cooperated fully with the prosecution. The charges against him were reduced to a single misdemeanor. He was sentenced to probation and 100 hours of community service. He and Lauren separated 6 weeks after the verdict. Tyler Hargrove's testimony was considered a material contribution to the prosecution's case. He was not charged with any offense. The morning after the verdict, Barbara woke at 5:45 like always. She put on her robe. She walked downstairs. She made her coffee. 2 spoons, no sugar, 4 minutes, and stood at the kitchen window. The dogwood tree was in full bloom, that specific pink, that annual, reliable, unasked-for pink that showed up every April like a promise the yard had made to itself a long time ago and kept without fail, regardless of what the winters had been like. She thought about Robert. She thought about Tyler, who came on Sundays now and was getting close on the cornbread. She thought about Lauren and held the complexity of that feeling without trying to resolve it, the way you hold something very heavy when there's nowhere yet to set it down. She had not spoken to her daughter since the verdict. She didn't know if she ever would. She had decided that was a question for a different season. She drank her coffee. Outside, the dogwood bloomed pink and quiet and entirely, stubbornly, magnificently hers.